What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for The Flash, Season 5, Episode 7, titled, "O Come All Ye Thankful," and just based off the title, it's pretty obvious that this was going to be a Thanksgiving episode, and even though it is, I think it didn't really need to be a Thanksgiving episode. I mean, it didn't really contribute to the episode much. I mean, there obviously was the side storyline with Kaylin, Sherlock, and Cisco, but that storyline was pretty unnecessary, in my opinion, and there wasn't really much of a Thanksgiving theme for the most part, so that theme definitely didn't need to be there. But there was another theme that this episode followed, which was fathers and daughters. You had the Barry Allen and Nora Allen, then you had Weather Wizard and Weather Witch, and then not really father-daughter, but I mean, it's basically the same thing with Cicada and his niece, which was, I think, a bigger theme in this episode than the Thanksgiving themes. So a big part of this episode had to do with Cicada's origin story, which is following a tradition that was started in Season 4, where the 7th episode of the season has to do with the main villain's origin story. That one was about DeVoe, this one was about Cicada, and I'm guessing that from now on, every 7th episode will have to do with the main villain's origin story. So this one revealed a lot of things about Cicada. Specifically, one is his real name is actually Orlin Dwyer. Originally, I thought his name was David Hirsch, but then it was confirmed that it is a different person. Then his name was revealed to be Orlin, which confirmed that he wasn't actually an original character, because there's nobody in the DC Comics named Orlin. Then it was confirmed that his daughter, or so I thought, was named Grace Gibbons, which meant that his name is actually Orlin Gibbons, which is also a terrible name for a main villain. But now through this episode, it's confirmed that his name is actually Orlin Dwyer, which is a much better name. But I also don't understand why they just didn't go with David Hirsch. I think they just did that to have some sort of way to get Sherlock Wells onto the team, which I really don't like that they did that. I think that they should have just stuck to David Hirsch from the comics, because now he's an original character, which, I mean, it usually sometimes turns out pretty great, but I just usually would also prefer him to be the character from the comics, which is David Hirsch. So, getting to his actual origin story, I thought for the most part it was a pretty great origin story for the main villain. It was revealed that his daughter is actually not his daughter, it's his niece, which did, or had the potential to give him some more motivation for hating metahumans. So in the beginning, it was revealed that his sister and brother-in-law were killed in a metahuman attack, which left him with his niece. I think then they should have emphasized a little more that he already hates metahumans, so that was one straw, and then the straw at the end, which broke the camel's back, was his niece being put in a coma, and then he hates metahumans completely. Instead, they didn't really emphasize that fact, and I'm sure he already hates metahumans for the fact that they were responsible for the death of his sister and brother-in-law, but I think they should have emphasized that, because that really would have made his motivation that much more impactful. Which, don't take that wrong, I do think his motivation is solid. I just think it would have been awesome, and the motivation would have been so much better if they really emphasized at the beginning that he already doesn't like metahumans, and then later he starts hating them, and then because his niece was put into a coma because of them, he wants to kill them, and that would have been so much more impactful and also believable. Still, though, the origin story was not bad. I do think that the scenes between him and his niece and building up that relationship, that was actually pretty great. Like, those scenes were just really sweet. The actress who played the niece was pretty great for a child actress, like surprisingly good for a child actress. And then at the end, the climax of that storyline was definitely a believable scene, and the fact that he cares about his niece also very believable, and it makes him obviously a more three-dimensional villain. And I also do genuinely care about the character now, whereas before he just felt like a threatening character, which is fine because he wasn't really given character development until this point, which is not a bad thing at all. There are so many episodes to give him character development, and in this episode they just chose to do it here, which it was really great. The character development he got in this episode was really good. I really care about the character more at this point, but I think it was great. It could have been amazing if they just really emphasized that thing that I talked about a minute ago at the beginning. So that brings me to the next storyline, which has to do with the Flash, XS, Weather Wizard, and Weather Witch. The first thing I want to talk about is Nora Allen, because I know that I'm not alone in saying that she's kind of getting on my nerves, being angry at something all the time. There hasn't been many episodes where she just wasn't angry at something, which is disappointing, because in the first episode I liked her a lot, and I thought that they had a lot of potential with the character, but they really haven't done much with her, and I think all they're doing is stirring up drama between her, Iris, and Barry, which was also in this episode where she got angry at Barry for not much of any reason. I mean, her anger was believable, but now at this point, episode 7, she's been angry at somebody for like every episode. First she's angry at Iris, now she's angry at Barry. It's getting old at this point, which I think is also disappointing because in this episode in particular, it wasn't that bad, and I think if she wasn't angry at Iris for so many episodes, it would have turned out to be so much better in this episode, which all that built up anger, which we haven't seen before, which in this case we have, would have been something new, and in this episode I think it would have been somewhat believable. I think the actress does a pretty great job at her emotional scenes in this episode. I genuinely think the character is concerned about Barry, and what she's saying isn't unreasonable, but I do think that all these storylines of her getting angry at somebody, specifically her parents in the future, or in the present day, I guess, it got old at this point, which is unfortunate for this episode, because this episode was easily the one that did it the best, specifically with its resolution. That resolution with her realizing that people do need the Flash in their lives, or the city needs a Flash, that was pretty good, and this episode in general wasn't bad with the drama, but in the season they just did it too many times, but at this point it is already too much. The villain of this week is Weather Witch, who is generally better than most villains of the week, only because, well, her powers are interesting, and I think they're different enough to weather wizards to actually be pretty cool, and she is a part of some storyline, just like the Icicle, whose powers were pretty interesting, although not that much different to Killer Frost, but he was also part of a storyline which made him that much more important, and Ragdoll, whose powers were super interesting, he was super creepy, and he was a part of a storyline as well, unlike the villains of last season, who were all just plot devices with superpowers that the Flash needed to stop. These characters are actually characters with interesting powers and a part of storylines, and Weather Witch, while not as good as the Icicle and especially Ragdoll, is just like that, and I do like this method of villains of the week. That being said, I don't think that Weather Witch has the longevity that the Icicle and Ragdoll have the potential of having. For instance, I think she is a good villain of the week, but I do not think she would be a good recurring villain, and although she will appear after this because of her storyline with Weather Wizard, I don't want her to appear after this one. So the climax to this storyline was easily the best part of the episode. There was the resolution to all of Nora Allen's built-up anger, which I did like quite a lot, and then the face-off between the Flash and Weather Witch, which was a pretty great callback to the pilot episode of the first season, or the pilot episode of the show in general, where the Flash took down Weather Wizard by running around the storm. Here, she creates a lightning storm, and he runs around it with the wand, which defeats the storm and defeats Weather Witch in the process. One thing I'll say is that I really appreciate the fact that Barry, aka the Flash, defeated a villain on his own without any help. I do think that it is really cool when he actually is able to do that, and this is one of those episodes where he succeeds. And the fight, not really a fight, but the scene in general it looked good, even though the lightning maybe looked a little bit more fake than he usually does, like a little bit more CGI than he usually does. Obviously, it's always CGI, but here it was very noticeably CGI, which was a little distracting, but in general, the scene definitely looked pretty great, and it was a pretty great climax to the episode and a great callback to the pilot episode. They even they even played the same music, so in general, pretty great ending to this storyline, which maybe the storyline wasn't as good as it could have been, but still definitely not bad, and a great climax. So then there was the storyline with Sherlock, Caitlin, and Cisco, which I did hint at earlier. I do think was completely unnecessary. It just feels like every episode so far there's just one storyline that is completely unnecessary to the whole season, really, and it just is there to give these characters, specifically Sherlock, Caitlin, and Cisco, something to do, which is weird because there are 3 main characters in this season who did not appear in this episode at all. Joe wasn't around, obviously that's one, but that's just because the actor is injured and he can't really be on the show right now. But then there's also Cecile, who I'm glad didn't appear in this episode. But then Ralph was just noticeably gone. He was not around in this episode, and unlike Cecile and Joe, it was never explained, unless if I missed it, so he wasn't given anything to do. So why give Sherlock, Caitlin, and Cisco something to do other than pad the runtime? They could have given them some character development, but instead it was literally just an unnecessary storyline for no reason, and it wasn't even funny either. So in conclusion, this episode was definitely not the worst or best episode of the season. There were a lot of problems, specifically the unnecessary side storyline with Sherlock, Caitlin, and Cisco. Ralph was not in the episode at all. Cicada's motivation could have been emphasized so much more, and Nora Allen getting angry at something is getting old. But on the bright side of that, there are a lot of good in this episode as well. Nora Allen being angry, although it is getting tired, this episode did it so much better than any other episode, and it was resolved at the end, which was great. And then there were these great scenes, like the one where the Flash defeated Weather Witch, and Weather Witch was definitely not a great villain of the week. She was a good one nonetheless, and even though Cicada's motivation could have been emphasized a little bit more, it was a good one nonetheless, and his origin story was pretty great nonetheless. So I am a little torn, but I do think this episode had so much more good than it had bad, so I'll give the episode an 8.7 out of 10. But anyway, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.